Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today in our diversity series. So it's a great honor. Actually, it is an honor to have Michael, Professor Michael Huth, who is the director, so the head of computing, not just the director, the head of the computing department at Imperial. And it happens that Michael has joined Imperial College London 23 years ago as a postdoctoral researcher. So he will tell us today about his career journey, his transitions, and he has so many exciting and insightful lessons to share with us. So thank you, Michael, for joining us today, and we're looking forward to your talk.
Thanks very much, Islam, and thanks so much for coming. Really look forward to this talk. I should also say it's a real pleasure to see Islam here because I believe one of my nice duties as head of department is to also recruit academics, and so very happy that you joined us. All right. That's very kind. Thanks, Islam. So I'm actually a bit nervous, I have to admit, because I'm not sure I have given a talk like this before. That says things like a personal perspective. Yes. So we'll see how that goes. Yes. So anyway, so I just wanted to first maybe try and define two terms. So one is this concept of convergence science. And you may have noticed this in Imperial's new strategy, right? So there's these schools of convergence science that are being proposed. So here's one attempt of defining this, referring to transdisciplinary integrations of scientific disciplines. But for what? In tackling complex problems, and Imperial is very much in this space, advancing science, obviously it's in that space, and that I find interesting, in tackling fundamental structural challenges in our research universities, funding systems, policies, and partnerships. Yeah. So if you think about this, there's a lot of transformation and rapid progression in the sciences and AI and all the rest of it, but maybe the underpinning supporting structures aren't quite evolving, in that sort of sense to really support it as much as they should. So I think that's actually for you. Yeah. I mean, you're the next generation. You should actually help shape these kinds of things. Yeah. Speak to policymakers, extend your sphere of influence, not just in your immediate science area, but sort of have that wider thing in mind, because that will help not just you, it will help everyone else to do this a bit better. And I'm not saying that everything is completely wrong, right, that we have at the moment too. So, okay. And then, when I thought about this, so we clearly live in the age of AI at the moment, also in the public perception, and we have this trend of convergent science. So how does diversity come in here? Yeah. So, I mean, to me, diversity is really quite broad. Yeah. So it's diversity of perspective, of education, of culture, aspiration, talent, and lots of other things, right? So, and in a way, I think this is really, and it's known from research, this is what makes teams and institutions more resilient and innovative. So there was just a recent study, again, looking at medium-sized to large corporations, and you look at their longevity and you look at their diversity profiles, there's a very strong correlation of those who actually do well and survive. So, and really, we have this amazing progress in AI, but diversity is really needed there for many reasons. Yeah. And so maybe I'll give you an unconventional one. I mean, I think there's super fast progress, right? I mean, you all see this and you work on these kinds of things. But I'm not so sure, this is actually all the right progress and going in all the right directions. Yes. So, I mean, there's a lot of private equity floating around, funding the mainstream things that are going to be big, right? So if you have people, saying, I need to raise a round that's basically a third of the, gross capital product of the United States just to do a next thing in AI, something seems to be wrong. Yes. So there's maybe some diversity also needed in understanding how could you actually do something like this, maybe without relying on these vast resources. Yeah. So that's for me, I think that's very important. So my first lesson would be to say diversity and AI are really key enablers in this convergence science. Yeah. And if I also, with my department head, look at scientific disciplines, I mean, obviously we want to have strong discipline identities, right? But there's sometimes maybe an issue of respect. Yeah? So if you work with people from other disciplines, obviously they are not these sorts of experts in exactly those sorts of things. Yeah. And so just because they might say something not so insightful, right, on a certain thing, doesn't mean that they don't know what they're talking about, right? So this is also why this kind of diversity is quite important, that you come together in teams and have a respectful sort of forum where you try to do good things. And if you look at leading companies, I mean, that's the sort of job profile that they want. Yeah. So they don't want to have people who sit in their discipline expertise silos. They have to be able to work with others and work on problems that are meaningful to the company and the wider sort of context. Right. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions or challenge any of this as well. Yeah. So maybe getting into a bit of the personal part, so I'm obviously from a generation, maybe I shouldn't say my age right now, but you can sort of guess, right? So I basically grew up in the late 60s, 70s, yeah, in a small village, probably 25 miles east of the Frankfurt airport, just to sort of locate that. So that's just barely within the state of Bavaria. I mean, it was a very, very, nice childhood. I had, rich social fabrics. I was in various bands and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of information age, there was nothing, right? So, how do you feed your brain, right? So, I mean, you have lots of friends and you do stuff, but how do you feed your brain? So I mean, maybe by chance, I just came across philosophy books and I thought this was just the coolest thing, right? So when I was between 14 and 17, I just read a lot of this stuff. I had actually no idea what this was for, yeah, but it sort of, made my mind more satisfied than just looking at television. This was at an age where, as a kid, television programs, if you're lucky, would start at 5 p.m. Yeah, just to sort of give you a perspective here. Yeah, so this was super important for me. So in a way, this was my TikTok. I mean, obviously, TikTok is always on and is sort of a vast sort of universe in and of itself. But if I look back at this, I think what it did to me was it taught me reasoning, it taught me logic, it taught me reflection, and it also exposed me to different kinds of things. I mean, just even Plato's stuff, right? So you have the sophists and then you have the Socratic kind of ideology. You know, I mean, that's just quite mind-opening at the time. And then I was reading Popper later. This was like one of my first books in English, The Enemies of the Open Society, challenging all of this stuff as well, right? So, and that I am so grateful for, yeah. And I think this sort of gave me this sort of early foundation in just capturing knowledge, thinking about knowledge, being able to reason, being able to challenge things. It's so super valuable, yeah. So sooner you can do this, and you can transfer this into anything you want to do later, yeah. So that would be my sort of second lesson here from my adolescence and early adulthood. Yeah, then the next one, again, I mean, it's quite a personal sort of thing. So, I mean, I'm from this small village, right? And so in my circle of friends and relatives, no one went to university, So this was actually a world that was not known, yeah. And so when I finished my schooling, I had the license to go to university. I did my military service, it was 15 months, a little bit further north. And there I continued this reading of philosophy and so on, right? And I went into Bertrand Russell, Whitehead kind of things, so this is for the logicians, maybe something meaningful. So they were literally trying to establish formal foundations of mathematics, yeah, as a science. And again, I thought this was really cool. Yeah, so it resonated with my initial philosophy reading, but I actually discovered mathematics in a way. Because in school, truth be told, I was pretty bad in both English and mathematics. Yeah, so anyway, so because also I didn't connect with it. Yeah, so I don't think it was lack of intellectual ability. It was just sort of emotional lack of connection. And so when I read that, I thought, hey, that's really something I might want to do. Yeah. So I started talking to people saying, yeah, I think I might want to go to university. And they were saying, yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe. But they also pointed out to me in the German system, for example, you have lots of different pathways that can later converge. And you can actually get some really good income quite early on. So there's this basic economic question. Yeah, if you study for 5 years, and then you might get a sort of a low salary first, does that actually pay off in the long term? Yeah. But I just wanted to do it. Yeah, and I'm grateful that my family allowed that. But then when I said, yeah, I want to do mathematics, people just kind of looked at me, their chin dropped. I said, you want to do what? Yeah, so, I mean, this was really quite hard. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is I just kind of knew this is what I wanted to do. Yeah. And I knew this was risky. Yeah. And there were lots of people I remember in term one who did all these A levels and specialized courses in mathematics and physics. I didn't do anything like that. Yeah. And they came with first electronic calculators and all that stuff. But in the German system, you have to understand lots of people get admitted. And then in the first year, there's a big filtering going on. Yeah. And lots of these people actually started disappearing. Yeah. and I was still there, and I was actually beginning to thrive. Yes, I remember. I think one of my sort of key moments was when I was going into a lecture on set theoretic topology. Yeah, I mean, super abstract. I thought this is my kind of thing. Yeah, so I was really, really happy when I studied. Yeah, and again, I didn't quite know where this might lead to. Yeah, I just really enjoyed doing this. So I think really you have to sort of seek out what you're passionate about, embrace those fears and actually take those risks. It's really super important. Yeah. So because if you don't, if you just follow what most people do just because they do that, that's not a really good path for personal success, I would say. I hope that makes some sense. Yeah. Um, so I feel super privileged as well, because this was at a time, and I think it's still true in Germany, where education was more or less free, right? So I had to pay student union fees, maybe 50 quid a term or something like this. My parents had to help me out, in terms of rent and so on. But I was super grateful to be able to do that. And so then, when I came to the end of these kinds of studies, so this was a 4-year degree, more or less, I had always wanted to do a year abroad. Again, it was my sense of adventure. I wanted to see the world a bit of a different place, outside of Germany. And so at that time, there was no Erasmus program or anything like that. Yeah. So then I talked to my thesis supervisor, and he said, "Yeah, it's funny you mentioned it. I'm actually just flying to New Orleans to visit my former department, and maybe we can arrange something there." I said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And then it turned out they would be interested in maybe me doing a PhD. So I then had discussion. Oh my God, do I want to do a PhD? Yeah. And again, I mean, these people basically gave me that chance to get this sort of access. Yeah. So, I mean, I still had to apply and interview and so on, but I would never have imagined doing anything like that. Yeah. So this is really maybe for you. I mean, one thing that I took away from that in the last 20 years or so is just to be not just super grateful, but also recognize when you have people who could benefit from some advice or maybe some steerage or a conversation. Yeah, what would they actually want to do? Or maybe they're not seeing something that's not on their radar. Help them. Yeah, because I mean, it's not just altruism. It just makes you also feel better, right? And it makes the world a better place. So, I mean, this was Karl Heinrich Hoffmann, yeah, who was then at TU Darmstadt for a long time. So super, super grateful for him. And so I think, also being a leader, and I think many of you are or will be leaders in your fields, it is a lot also about kindness, yeah, and about talking to people, really understanding what drives them and seeing how you can help them. Yeah. It also means you sometimes have to tell them certain things that have to go in a certain direction, but that's more the management side of this. Yeah. But being kind and truthful, I think, is really important. So then in my PhD, I would say, so this was at Tulane University in New Orleans. So for me, this was quite an epiphany. I mean, I was just sort of projected into it was almost like a different planet. Yes. So coming from a rural German upbringing into this sort of cultural mix, sort of French, Spanish, Haitian culture, uh, you know, North American culture, right? All sort of thrown into a bowl. And I just absolutely loved this. Yeah. So we had these, I mean, my office was probably a little civil service box of half a square meter, with 2 panels of wood and then some people next to it. I absolutely loved this. Yeah. So there were people from China, from Australia, from, anywhere, and just talking to them. We were playing volleyball in the park, all these kinds of things. I mean, it was really something I had not imagined was possible. Yeah. And I think it kind of, to me, opened, how big the world really is and how many different perspectives there also are. Yes. So just meeting people from different cultures. For example, from rural Germany, I had very little access, for example, to Jewish culture. Yeah. So, and there was many, many Jewish mathematicians there. This was my first opportunity to even find out, what that culture is, and being invited home and so on and so forth. Super grateful for this kind of thing. Yeah. So, and I guess also, coming in there and studying, just the normal mathematics, but then going into topological algebra because I found that interesting, but then moving sideways because these models were also used in programming language semantics. Yeah. So I kind of shifted over into computer science in a way at the end of this PhD. And that led to my first postdoc in computer science. So that's maybe a first seed of what you might call a nonlinear CV. Yeah. So, and when we come back to that first slide on convergence science, I mean, I wager basically that CVs of the future will be much less linear. Yeah. So, and I think also, if I can speak fast forwarding to my next position, I think the people who called me up there, they called me up because I had a crazy CV. Yeah. So, I mean, it was all over the place basically, but it had the right sorts of things for a very complex and ambitious project. So, you know, it's really for you. I mean, don't think of you always have to go through that next hoop. That's the most natural one in your discipline. And certainly in machine learning, like things, there's this temptation, right? Everyone is following NeurIPS and so on. And, you know, everyone wants to work on the same sorts of things. That's maybe not the best thing long term. Yeah. So, so that's probably a message in this slide. So very happy years, I can assure you. And then I did my first postdoc at Kansas State University. So just a little anecdote, I was going to Carnegie Mellon for a workshop, and then I think I gave my first paper there even, or something like that. And there was the pre-reception, and then there was a group there sitting, and they were having some beers and something, and I just joined them. And it turned out this was the one who then was my supervisor. And he took all his people from the Midwest and drove them in his personal car 10 hours or 12 hours just to go to this workshop, right? So because he cared, right? And I was, oh, that's impressive. Yeah. So, and he had just a little bit of money left. So I was basically living above the poverty line, I would say, at Kansas State. But again, very, very good times. I learned an awful lot about category theory and, you know, programming language semantics. It was one of the centers in the US at the time on programming languages. And so, you know, but the other thing I also learned there was that Kansas State, which was this place, was a land grant university. Yeah? So this is the bill that goes back to Abraham Lincoln's presidency, where they basically, the federal state gave land to various states in the Midwest to establish universities, but with an obligation, a legal obligation, to actually have positive impact for those states, yeah, including particularly agriculture. Yeah, so this is actually very topical at Imperial, right? Science for Humanity. And so that was something, if I look back, you know, I really appreciated how serious people there take the research and the teaching. It isn't just for, you know, your personal scholarly pursuit. They're really kind of, you know, woven into the local communities and the state, and making sure that everyone is kind of taken care of. And that was a very inspiring lesson for me, I would say. So really try to influence how we organize fund and communicate science. Yeah, so it goes back to this third part of the convergent science definition. Yeah, then so I came to Imperial. So slight correction is that so I actually did a postdoc here in, I'm blushing to say this, in 1992, yeah, in the Department of Computing, and then decided to go have a little detour back to Darmstadt. But then I joined here actually in July 2001 as a senior lecturer, and you know, I think I probably had a bit of an imposter syndrome, to be honest. Yeah, because I mean, I came from a pretty good American university, had some pretty good training myself, but this was now, you know, going to the Champions League in a way. Yeah, so I mean, I didn't feel uncomfortable, I would say, but you know, I certainly thought, you know, I have to sort of prove myself, which is not a bad position to be in. Yeah, so, but I think what that also meant was that maybe after 2 or 3 or 4 years, I began to understand more what my weaknesses are. Yeah. And there, I think that's actually a point for all of you also when you speak with others. You should kind of monitor each other. Yeah. Maybe see someone has maybe some issues with certain aspects. Is it methodological? Is it behavioral or whatever? You know, there are constructive ways of seeking these conversations so that people actually identify where they can improve. Yeah. And some things might be hard to fix in a way, yeah. But at least if we're aware of them, we can understand how to manage them, yeah. So, so for example, I'm not the greatest person at remembering names in a room, right? So I know that that's probably a neural thing, yeah. So, but I try to sort of manage that and cope with that, yeah. But it's the awareness, I think that's quite important. So really, you know, recognize those weaknesses and work with them and manage them as you grow. It's very bad to think that you don't have weaknesses. Yeah. So, I mean, even the greatest leaders, often the great leaders have weaknesses too. Yeah. So that was sort of this phase of just trying to accommodate, being in this world-class environment and actually performing and feeling a part of it. So that was quite important for me, and also quite an achievement, I would say, in the end. Um, and I may have said before, I was always quite adventurous. Yeah, so that I understood, I guess, quite early on in my life. But I'm not sure I sort of understood what you could all do with this. Yeah, so when I had this PhD student in 2017 or so, um, he, quite soon during his PhD said, "Yeah, I want to do a startup in AI." And here's sort of the first ideas. And I thought, oh, that's very interesting. Here's some other sort of ideas and so on. And then, he sort of set up the company, and I helped in that. And then half a year or so after it was running, he just said, "Hey, don't you want to join?" Yeah. And I thought, hey, that's maybe something. I mean, it was also in my mid-50s. Maybe that's a good thing to sort of try to do. Yeah. So basically, Imperial was very kind to allow me to go to a small percentage. And so I was basically most of the time in Berlin, sort of coming back and forth. Um, and this was super, super important for me. Yeah. Because I mean, I had worked in corporate environments a bit before, but this was large corporates. Yeah. So just going through a startup world is really something I would recommend to all of you. Yeah. Maybe for a year or two. Um, just also to see all the crazy stuff. Yeah. So the good, the bad, and the ugly, basically. Yeah. And to understand how VC funding works and all that sort of dynamics. And the interpersonal skills you can learn in such an environment. You can't quite learn them in a very structured sort of research and education environment. Yeah. So for me, this was incredibly formative. I've been there 2.5 years or so. So I was CTO first, and then chief science officer next, and now I'm kind of in the second row. Yeah. And I think it also taught me that it's so difficult to find what you actually want to do in terms of products. Yeah. So now this is in its 6th year or so. And now we have a legal co-pilot, yeah, with a large law firm, CMS, and where the reinforcement learning was actually done by the lawyers. Yeah. So to really get that kind of expertise in the fine tuning. So my point here is really more, for me, it actually took a long time to discover what drives me most. Yeah. And I think from my 50s on, I would say it was really more this sort of the creative entrepreneurial sort of streak in me. Yeah. And in a traditional academic environment, that's quite a hard discovery. Yeah. Because you're always working on that next paper, you have your PhD students, you get some funding. Yeah. So that kind of, came up in the water onto the surface at some point. Yeah, and the startup experience basically gave me that, saying, hey, yeah, that's actually what I probably want to do for the rest of my career. Yeah. And so, and basically that's your point to you. Yeah. This stuff might take a long time to find out. Yeah. And also it may change during your life. Yeah. But I think also once you've found it, you will know. Yeah. So, and that's sort of the situation that I found myself in. It's quite liberating when you figured this out. Yeah, so then part two of Imperial, then kind of COVID came and startup went into sort of, sleep mode almost, right? So as they do. And I was basically asked to take over the department, in this sort of time. And so I thought, okay, maybe that's what I should do. Yeah, because in fact, it turns out I think this was actually quite an entrepreneurial thing. I mean, COVID was, of course, very complex in terms of managing. But we're now really, with this new strategy, we have a vision for, AI, interdisciplinary activities. Computing might actually move into a bigger place with other exciting AI-related digital sort of activities. So for me, this was really fantastic to help shape, to co-shape these kinds of initiatives and the thinking around it. So this really played into my, desire to do this kind of stuff. Yeah. And so I've been doing this for about 4 years. But one lesson I would probably say there is, as a head of department, you get to see all sorts of things, yeah, and you meet people in all sorts of situations. And I have to say, I wasn't quite prepared for some of this, yeah. And well, yeah, yeah, but also, some of it I could do without, yeah. So let me put it this way. So I think it's really important for everyone to have tools and routines to maintain mental health and resilience. Yeah. So, it's sort of even a bit personal in the lockdowns, I had to sort of find ways of just coping with being at home all the time and so on. I think I kind of managed. And, just playing play a bit of music on the side. So that these sorts of things really helped. You could do that at home, right? But also just for others. Yeah, and I think in this, cutthroat, or at least the perceived cutthroat environment of academia, it's just so easy, to crack, right? So, and also for people of your generation, you might be super anxious. Where's my next job? How do I climb up whatever ladder you might perceive in progression? Yes, so just finding ways of having a lot of resilience, yeah, and mental health. And I think it goes back to the previous points too, understanding what drives you. Yeah, well, what do you want to do? Maybe you're not thinking about this completely linear thing that everyone else is doing or your peers are succeeding in. So in fact, it's maybe a random example, but we had the School of Computing at National University in Singapore. Uh, Someone there told me they actually have a failure day for their undergraduate students. Yeah, because we also have this in our department, that the undergraduate students are super competitive, right? So they only see what the others achieve. And if they are slightly, worse than that, they have a huge problem, right? And so having a failure day where people just come up and talk, I mean, distinguished people, right? Let me get this clear, and talk about their failures. It's absolutely important for these undergraduates to hear these sorts of things. Yeah. So, and I could give you some examples of myself, which maybe I don't want to do today. Yeah, but maybe some of them were shining through. So I think that's super important. Yeah, and I think that also applies to leadership. Yeah, I mean, you can't be a leader if you can't have those sorts of support mechanisms yourself. Yeah. So that was for me, I think in those 4 years, probably the main challenge. Yeah, personally to sort of be above board and stable, but also to try and help other people when these issues came up. Yeah. So then my last lesson is really under development. So as some of you might know, it is the first university created in Germany, in the state of Bavaria, in the age of the internet. So it's like 28 years ago, I think was the last one created. And it's really meant to be for convergence science in the age of AI. Yes. So, and the more I kind of talked to them, the more I got hooked in a way. Yes. So this kind of comes back to my other point, this entrepreneurial thing. Yes. So this will probably mean that my career as a scientist, as we understand it, has probably come to an end. Yeah, because this is a super CEO project essentially. I mean, it's already in place for 3 years, but there's so many things now to do. A whole campus, 38 hectares built. Figuring out departmental models. There will be no faculties, by the way. There will be no German-speaking Lehrstühle. So it's quite a radical new way of thinking about it. And AI will be interwoven in everything. Yeah, and there will be sort of like AI for science. So there will be lots of activity fields that cuts across disciplines. And so we also want to figure out how we can do sort of postdoc careers and support them better, like in a model such as this one here. Yeah, and all the taught programs will be in a single school. And they will have a center of gravity in a department, and liberal arts and social sciences will be in all of the technical degrees. Yes, so you will not just have an ethics boilerplate thing. Pardon me for saying that. Yes, so but you have, for example, the department chair in liberal arts and science is a Greek classicist. Yes, so she is, I mean, not only a scholar of Greek ancient thinking, but she's also a specialist in how perceptions of technologies were from the ancient world, through to the Renaissance, Enlightenment, into the heated age of the current AI, right? So I think these things are actually quite important, because if you go to LinkedIn or wherever and you see all these debates, about AGI and all that kind of stuff, these classically trained people, they're basically saying, oh yeah, that discussion, you can read it up in the Enlightenment period. I mean, it was more or less there, right? So maybe some slight new flavor here. So I think it's quite important to train young people, in these much richer perspectives in a historical concept as well. So I'm kind of excited to help drive that forward. And, hopefully in 5 years' time, I will have a really good lesson for that. But at the moment, I'm just nervous and excited to join that in October. And I'm really sorry I will have to leave Imperial, because it's the sort of role that doesn't allow for any kind of splits. And I hope that talk was interesting. I'm not really sure, but I just hope you find some of this useful, And I mean, you clearly are the generation of next leaders in AI, and I wish you all the very best. Thanks so much.
So, yeah, so I have a list of questions, but probably I'll start with you guys if you have any questions to Michael. You go ahead.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I can share some of the experience I had in my life. I think about where I came from and so on. And what I see is that at our generation, maybe, we actually had the time to explore new things, right?
Yeah.
We had the time to take the zigzag in our life and take those risks, exactly like you're saying. And also appreciating the beauty of knowledge discovery, because knowledge wasn't under our fingertips, right? It was just, it was for us to look at. It was a driving force, right? So how do you see this in the context of the new generation, right? Where actually knowledge is all there for them, and actually too much that what they can actually process. Right? And where the risk of making a wrong turn might be actually bigger consequences in terms of daily life. Maintaining a job.
So that's an excellent and tough question. Yeah. I mean, you sort of see it in the web-based machine learning already, right? I mean, trying to distinguish between automatically generated information and human information, right? So human generated, purely human generated information, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't know where that will go really, but yet again, I think that there will always be a need, because I mean, if you think of, I mean, actual genuine neurological changes to the brain take about 20,000 years in the evolution. Yeah. So if you just sort of look at that, yeah. So I think there will always be a genuine need for discovering, yeah, and that might not be the old-fashioned library, but probably some actual book that someone had read, yeah, and you might read that and talk with a friend about it, yeah. So I think that will probably not go away anytime soon, yeah. The way we work and maybe do R&D and so on, that clearly will change an awful lot, yeah. But I'm not sure if that's really answering the question, but I think we should not forget that the brain changes, in super slow motion, yeah. So yeah.
How do you choose which opportunities to take and which ones to pass on?
Good. Yeah, that's an excellent question. I have to say, if I'm honest, in some of these things, I just followed my gut feeling. Yeah, so I don't think there was a lot of rationalization or so. And I think if I had done that, I suspect lots of, arguments would have come that would stop things. Yeah, so that's why I said, it's quite important to kind of follow your passion and be able to take risks. I mean, it's good to talk to friends and family before you do something, and they might say, "Yeah, that sounds like a stupid kind of thing, but we will support you. Maybe that's what you should do." Yeah. So, yeah.
So in your new university, you thought about how you're going to encourage the youth supposedly to explore, right? Because I mean, say you say you do computer science, and then you're only exposed to these computer science problems. Just do computer science research. You don't really veer too far off, right?
Good question.
How do you encourage that, right?
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah. So there was basically the university was set up through a founding concept, which was a commission with people from Stanford, I think India and Germany and various other places.
Undergraduate education.
Exactly, it's like that. Yeah.
Educated like this. And in fact, going back to doing unconventional things, I was delighted. I didn't have my degree recognized.
Yeah.
I studied at Harvard, and mother wanted to be this, stamped.
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, this, this is not an education.
It's
liberal arts education."
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely passionate about.
Yeah.
Good. To learn how to write, how to read a poem, how to be a philosopher. You have to know biology, physics, and math, even if you are not.
Yeah.
But that's maybe now in the time of AI we need it more.
Yeah, that's actually true. So I mean, just to answer the question, that's great you say that. So we will probably have a degree. I mean, it's not formally decided yet, but the second master program, these are 2-year programs, will probably be called Human and Artificial Intelligence. So that's very much the title of the Convergence School. But this will basically probably have an MSI stream and an MEng type stream. And so you can basically admit people who have more computer science background and people who have more liberal arts background, but they will all be in the same cohorts. And so, the liberal arts people will do maybe more Python type, statistical modules first. The others will do more liberal arts stuff first. And then the middle thing will be kind of similar, lots of modules. And then there will be a year-long project, where also the expectation is to kind of go a bit broader in what you're doing there. So I think in that sense, it's sort of designed in, that you will not just stay in one discipline when you get your training. And it's also anticipated by 28, or we will be the first 3-4 year bachelor. And again, that will probably be more a computer science one, but if I get my way, it will certainly have liberal arts type things in it and lots of ethics, but it will probably also have some entrepreneurial sort of business things in it. I would actually like every computer science student at least to have the option to get a skill where you put them a patent application on the desk and say, all right, you read that. How credible is that? What would you go for? Is it a US patent or, that sort of, these are super important skills, right? And we can always learn some more technical things on our own once we have that grounding. Yeah. So I think that's partly written into the founding concept, which was a deliverable of a commission that's sort of convened for 2 years to really think about, how would you do and run a university if you could build one now? Yeah. And so that was quite visionary, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do we have any questions? Yeah.
I suppose I was wondering if the new university you'd thought about how you're going to deal with basically big academic publishers. I guess.
Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Fees, would you not?
Yeah.
You'd be publishing in open access or printing.
Yeah, I don't think the university has a position on that yet. In a way, there's much more pressing problems like getting students in, making sure you can educate them and having buildings ready and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, absolutely, that's there. My personal view is obviously, I would love to have as much open access as possible, because in a way also the college is now going the next stage of saying it's not just about publications, it's pretty much about anything you do around research. So I think that will be something that I will argue for, but I'm only one person in a governing body at the end of the day. But I think a university that will have remit of AI sort of at its core would be very wise to follow. So you're obviously all aware of a bit of a bifurcation in terms of large language models. The sort of the ones that are completely open, and then there's the ones that maybe just give you an API, right? But that's sort of commercial reality, right? But if you're just sort of within research and education, I would be at that end that's very, very transparent. Yeah.
I've got a question for you. So in the university, what sorts of, beyond the simple metrics like publications and how else are you going to measure what good looks like?
Yeah, very good question. So this is also the first probably German university that has a tenure track system. The German systems have junior type positions, but they have no continuation perspective within their frame. Yes, so this is sort of what we change. And there, to me, it would be very important that the KPIs for tenure are actually quite flexible, because every person is a bit different, their aspirations or what they want to do. So, I wouldn't want to do these sort of how many NeurIPS papers you have and that sort of thing. That's probably not very healthy. Also, I would hope that we manage to design the campus as a smart campus, so that pretty much everything has sensors and so on within the privacy sort of safeguards, and where we can also do visualization, 3 or 2-dimensional. I'm actually already speaking to a branding company about that, where we could also have a static next to a dynamic branding, and then weave this also into student apps and all sorts of things. So, just an example, I'm not sure if we will do this. If people in real time, at a certain campus location say, how do you feel today? That kind of stuff. We could actually have heat maps, these sorts of things, and actually render them in a way that you would recognize from the dynamic cloud dot of the brand, things like that. So that to me is not exactly a KPI, but that's sort of a way of, understanding how you're doing. So, And also, I think in the German-speaking world, what is commonplace in Britain, staff-student committee meetings, regular surveys for students, listening to what they say, adjusting the degree programs, that's very what we will have on mind. Yeah, and in Germany, this is actually quite revolutionary.
May online people ask a question? Hi, I'm not sure if you can hear me. But...
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm sorry, I'm probably butting in, but forgive me. My name's Susan Scott, and I'm so pleased to be able to be with you virtually. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person today. I've been a professor at the London School of Economics. I'm a social scientist by training, and I'm joining IX in August. So
wow, great.
I hope they're aware I'm a social scientist in the wild and not doing boilerplate ethics, but this will be something we discover about each other as we go forward. And that really gets to the core of my question. You mentioned mutual respect within epistemically diverse, multidisciplinary teams. And I would be really interested to hear from your experience how you establish mutual respect, how you reinforce that as a norm, as a value, and how you will structure. You have the opportunity, amazing opportunity, to build structures, rules, resources around that notion in your new role. So both from your past experience, your current understanding of how to achieve it, and going forward, how will you enact that?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's a tough question as well, and a good one. I mean, first of all, I think it's also just raising awareness, sort of a first step. I mean, if people don't even realize that they might disrespect someone just because they think they're not up to, scratch in their own discipline, that's already a problem, right? So you need to raise that sort of awareness. And I think also just reflecting, you might have been in a conversation. I mean, it's a bit like with any behavioral things. Yeah, if you feel a certain meeting or something wasn't quite right, it might be good to take someone on the side and just, sort of gently say, hey, maybe that was so great, that person didn't quite feel respected there. So I think, but the other point I was going to make is, I think this is a bit like thermodynamics. Your work is never done there. Yeah, so you always have to sort of put in that energy, and so that's maybe also where these institutional processes or communications have to be there to sort of support that. You have to be maybe also an energy source. And I think it's also partly, the recruitment strategy. I think it's quite important to maybe not just look at the scientific excellence of people, but clearly this university has that ambition, just to be clear, but to also communicate, this is this sort of place, this is what we want to become. And we welcome people who have this sort of person spec, in a sense. And I'm not sure we do that at Imperial at the moment. Yeah, so I mean, it comes through a little bit in interviews for lectureships where you talk about collaborations and being open to other sorts of things, but it's really quite sort of shy in the way in which that is explored. Yeah, so I want to think about how we might want to do that for our recruitment processes. Yeah, to really make clear this is very much driven in values around convergence science. And I mean, clearly people will be situated in departments, but it's very much about transdisciplinary work. Yeah, I'm not sure if that helps answering the question.
Yeah, no, it was really, really interesting. Thank you. Beginnings, I think, are enormously important here.
Yeah,
and remaking boundaries. As you said, the ongoing work of making and remaking boundaries. Yeah.
So my first 2 years on the job are actually crucial in a way. Yeah.
Right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask the next question. So you mentioned in your presentation that you're grateful that you found people who gave you the opportunity. And I found that very inspiring because I can relate to that too. Coming myself from low middle income country, from North Africa, the opportunities are very scarce. So you really need to stand out to be able to kind of get funding and get scholarships and all these things. And my question is, how do you see futuristic universities that bring in humanities and have humanitarian kind of big visions, not only locally for, like geographically local, like Germany or even Europe, right? But globally, how can we provide opportunities for these underrepresented students or those who have potential, but they don't have people to give them that opportunity that yourself and myself got?
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's a super important question. I mean, for a new university, this is quite a complex question too, right? So
they're complex. I guess.
So I mean, one of the things I would like to set up, I mean, I will probably only be there for 5 years or so. But within those 5 years, I would at least try to set up fundraising that has quite a breadth of activities. And one of them would be funding for, scholarships and studentships for actually, people from underrepresented groups or certain geographic locations. So at the moment in Bavaria, you only have to fund maybe transport and the living costs and the food, because the student fees are basically nominal. So that's sort of a big difference. And so that's actually quite good for the university because the state is kind of invested in this, so you can actually do a lot of good in that. I think from a political point of view, they would probably then also say, okay, if we pay the fees, we have also an interest if quite a few of those students might stick around. So there's this hashtag study and stay. So that's really part of that discussion. But I would certainly want to have some sort of access path that allows for that. And since we don't have to worry about the fees, that's actually something I think we can do. Also, we really want to engage. So this is in the city of Nuremberg in northern Bavaria. We want to engage very much with the schools. So this is very much sort of a white city campus thing. So we want to reach out into the schools, bring them in, make sure they get exposed to these kinds of informatic AI themes. And there will also be actually a very large bioengineering, chemistry, physics, biology, but with a view on engineering, wet materials and all that sort of stuff. So, and I think that's maybe also how we can attract some of these young people, to work in these kinds of spaces. Because traditional engineering, as you may know, the interest in the young generation is dropping dramatically. So that's also a challenge for our engineering departments. So.
Do you think that the curriculum will be engaging to an engineer? Because I myself find it very challenging to engage, computer science students to attend ethical or philosophical workshops. So we've been organizing this EPIMI, Ethical and Philosophical Issues in Medical Imaging workshop internationally, Class A1 conference for 2 years. And then the rate of participation is very low. And I've done one-on-one invitation and trying to engage, trying to sensitize people of the importance of that, but I found it very difficult. So how do you plan to kind of?
That's a good point. I mean, I guess one answer is if you look, for example, at our colleague Lucia Spezia, right? Her startup that got bought by Epic Games, where they do real-time detection of dubious speech, right? And then you might suggest friendlier conversations and so on. So that's very much an ethical kind of thing in a way, right? So if you can embed it into a project and you want to achieve some things technically, and you say, oh, there's actually these issues here, and that's why I meant boilerplate, so you can't just sort of build a product and then sort of call the ethicists, so to speak, right? So that's the wrong way of doing it. You actually want to embed them in those teams. And so that's why I think we have probably a way of dealing with that. And admittedly, some people might want to not go into a philosophy lecture, right? So, but I should also say this university will have no lecture halls. So this will basically be all student-centric learning, a lot of flipped classroom, not always, but it will basically be only spaces like this, where people come together. So they come already where they have done some other things offline, and then it's sort of helping them in these sessions. So, it's really trying to break with this tradition of lecturing. And I think there's also a lot of other universities that look at this with some nervousness too. So it could be disruptive. Who knows?
How often will they come together? Like, is it 30% of the week, 20%?
I mean, there's a course running right now on AI and robotics. I have to confess, I actually don't know how often they come. I would think it's probably 3 or 4 days a week that they come in for a couple of hours. But really, the vision is to build more something that you would recognize as an Asian or American campus. So quite a few portions, or even Imperial, right, with the library, quite a bit of it would be 24/7. farmer markets, nurseries, wash saloons, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so which is also breaking with the traditional tradition of German-speaking universities.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so everything will be taught in English. Yeah, exactly. So, good point. Yeah.
Any other questions?
And there will probably be some job ads for postdocs and tenure track as well. So, not to make this a shameless plug, but.
Have any final advice to everybody? Like, just take home message,
I don't know. I mean,
like something that you feel was is very important for us to kind of look forward to or to think about in terms of research, like for example, or in terms of education. Like maybe I can wrap up with this question. What do you think is most lacking in our current educational institutions? Like something that is really lacking and you feel that that is a big gap that we should think about it at least or consider it. Loopholes. Let's maybe wrap up with the loopholes and then.
All right. Yeah. I mean,
There's
not sure how to answer this, but I mean, what I kind of see, if you look at it's sort of Humboldtian tradition, right? I mean, sort of North American campuses were kind of built, I guess, on the Prussian tradition of running universities and the Oxbridge kind of tradition, yeah, and so lectures and and this sort of typical way of engaging, writing exams and so on. I'm actually not sure that that's sort of viable, yeah, in terms of how future learning will work. I mean, if you think of now all these AI tools and the way you can support your own experiences of learning and so on, we will have to react to that. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm almost feeling that students come in, maybe I shouldn't say this, knowing that this is sort of an old world thing, but they just sort of put up with it, yeah, because it's sort of a 3 or 4 year campus experience, which is a very nice formative thing anyway, right? And then they use all their tools, yeah. So, I mean, it would be interesting to know how many actually go to lectures versus how much time they spend on 3 blue, 1 brown type things, yeah. So, so I think there's quite a few maybe people in leadership who haven't quite sort of fathomed that yet. Yes, so we probably have also very poor data on this at the moment. But I think this, to me, seems the biggest challenge. And so that's also partly why I was interested in this project, because within its founding concept, it's almost acknowledging that, yeah, and saying we should actually build something that's quite different, yeah, and then we can also adjust it and also build our campuses to already reflect that, yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael. Let's give Michael a